not everyone in the year 2018 like comes into the world being like, I want to do vintage fashion. I love vintage fashion. I'm into this. Like, so for your story, how did you get involved in vintage in the first place? Like, what brought you to vintage fashion?
Well, I'm a dancer. I'm in the kind of jazz scene, dancing-wise, swing dancing, Lindy hopping, and that took place at a time in history, the 20s, 30s, 40s.
So did you do any vintage clothing before?
Not
before
really.
dancing?
No.
You weren't really into the culture of the 20s and 30s.
No, and I would say like I'm not really a die-hard vintage person and say the way I dress and whatnot. I have
You wouldn't
taste.
say that, and yet you make all these wonderful hats.
Yeah, that's true.
So
I would say like my style is what I like to wear or what I like to make for hats, and they're not a straight up reproduction of any particular hat. It's more of my interpretation of what when I see a vintage hat, I'm gonna say, "Well, that's a nice hat. I think I'll make something like that." And
so you started dancing.
yes.
You started getting into vintage culture.
Right.
You started getting into like vintage dress. How did you actually decide I want to make a hat?
Well, I have worn hats my whole life.
What did you start with, like baseball caps or?
Well, actually, when I was 12, my grandmother gave me an 8-quarter panel cap, similar to this, and a harmonica. And I thought I was just the coolest 12-year-old ever. And I learned how to play the harmonica, and I wore hats like that ever since. And one day, my dog tore up my most favorite 8-panel hat, and I had to stitch it back together. So
how old were you when you had to stitch it?
I was like 14.
So you loved that hat because I was several years old at that point.
That's true.
Probably not looking brand new anymore.
Not looking good, especially after my dog got hold of it.
But you fixed it.
I did.
And you kept wearing it.
Yes.
How long did you hang on to that hat?
Well, it got pretty roached out at some point. I think I had it till I was about 32. 30. Yeah. And it wasn't.
And you finally let go at 32.
Well, there's a story.
That's a well-loved hat.
Yeah.
It's a well-loved hat.
So, and I would buy hats every now and then. And when I started Lindy hopping, obviously I wore a lot of hats. I mean, I was just a hat guy. When I danced, I would wear hats. And
so did it just click for you? You came in, you watched the old videos, you're like, that guy's wearing an 8-panel hat. I know that thing.
No, not really. It was more why I started making them was I was more interested in learning how to sew clothes, pants, shirts, jackets for myself, and never took apart a jacket or a shirt or pants before, but I had taken apart many 8-quarter panel hats and caps in my lifetime to fix them, or because I didn't like the way the liner was, I'd pull it out and I'd put something else in. So I knew how that hat kind of went together, so that's where I started to learn how to sew, which the goal was to build up into making my own pants, my own shirts, and stuff.
Is that still the goal, or is this like?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't think so. Maybe at some point that'll happen. But
because you've moved beyond sewing.
I have.
You have moved beyond sewing, and one of the interesting things is you have a new addition this year in your booth, and that is the straw hat. The straw hats.
So what happened was I started manufacturing the cloth caps to sell, and realized that I needed more machines to help in the process. At the time I was working on a treadle machine, and I realized that if I was going to manufacture them and make any type of profit on it, I would have to get some industrial machines. So it was very interesting. A man that I used to caddy for when I was 10, 11, 12, wearing that cap, he ended up talking to my dad, and my dad was telling him how I was doing and told him I was making hats, and he was like, hats? he needs machines, and evidently, I didn't know this, that his first business was making straw hats.
Oh, wow.
Back in the 40s and the 50s. He was 18, well, yeah, he was about 18, 19, his first company. And when he was in high school, he worked for the Upton Hat Company, which was one of the largest hat companies in the world at that time, 30s, 40s. And he learned how to make hats there of all kinds. And he started making straw hats out of his basement in Franklin, Mass. When he was like 19 years old. And later on, he went into making vamps for women's sandals. And what he would do is he had all these New England braid machines that would make braided, not straw, but other materials like cotton or hemp or jute. And he would take that braid and he would use the braid machines and sew them into different designs, and they'd have little different colors, and he'd sell those for vamps on ladies' sandals for the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and that's how he made all his money. So my dad contacted, we're talking to him, they were good friends, and he says, well, he's got to come down and take some of my machines. I got plenty of sewing machines.
So he's just going to give you a machine?
Well, he had 2 tractor trailer fulls of old vintage industrial sewing machines
in storage
that had been sitting there for 30 years.
And is that what this is?
Yeah, these are some of the straw machines. So originally I went in there and I was looking for regular overlock stitch machines for the hats. I picked up about 4 of those machines from them. While I was there, I saw these other machines that I didn't know what that was.
So how old is this? What are we looking at?
Was probably made in 1900, 1910.
So this is an actual vintage
Wilcox and Gibbs straw braid machine.
Straw braid. Now does this create the braided threads, or does this
No, that
sew
actually
the braided threads?
it actually sews the braid. We have some braid here. It actually sews the braid in a circular pattern until you have a body of a hat. So each machine does the same thing, but this machine here is a zigzag stitch, and this machine imitates the hand stitch of a straw hat that someone would do in the 1800s. Okay,
and these you all got from your friend.
I just happened to see him there, and I was like, well, those are cool. I wonder what those are. So I asked him. He goes, well, those make straw hats. He says, you should take a few of those. I said, well, I'm not making straw hats. I have no interest in doing straw hats. He's like, well, just help, take a few of those. So I did. I took these 3.
Did you know how to use them or anything?
I had no clue what they were. So, and they didn't work. They were all, disassembled more or less because people had come in and taken parts off them to run other machines. And so I started doing some research and finally figured out what they were. And I'm mechanically inclined, so I kind of geeked out over the mechanicalness of the machines and figuring out how they work and getting them to run. And so I got them running. And they were sewing really good. And I said, well, I probably should make a straw hat.
And how different is it from a modern sewing machine? Like you had familiarity with some modern sewing stuff from working on your more traditional A panels.
What makes us be able to sew straw hats is first there's a free arm there, so you have it set up on a table and it overhangs the edge of the table, like there's a cutout here, and it's hooked up to a motor. So this free arm is free, so you can go and sew this like that, and then you can turn it and sew it down like this, and then you can turn it again and sew it like this. And then you have just the blank of the hood of the straw. And these are all chain stitch, so like there's a little hook in it, there's no bobbin, it's just one thread that comes in. And this it'll create a little chain stitch, which allows you, if you miss a stitch, which happens, or if there's a really big flaw in the straw and you want to take it out, you can pull the chain stitch out and unravel it back to where you want to be sewed. That's what really makes these able to do their particular 4-straw hats.
So you figured all of this out on your own, like you got no instructions. Like
There's like 2 videos on this machine here of like 1952. Someone, most of women sewing these hats nonstop and showing how the
like
process.
a documentary video?
Yeah, a little docu-series.
Oh, wow. All right.
So I watched the 30 seconds, sort of like how I still dance steps.
Oh yeah, I mean,
You watch it and you wind it back and you watch it again and you kind of figure it out and then you try what you're seeing and it doesn't work. And the hat becomes, you like to make the first hat, it's like that big, you can't figure out how to get the right size. Yeah, it was just a lot of trial and error. And the last 6 months I've been producing some very, very good quality straw. Historically, the straw, if you look at this straw, which is the finest type, it's a very small 4mm straw. And historically, they would refer to that as a Milan straw.
now historically, like when was this style of a straw hat popular?
Well, you're talking 30s or 40s when it first came out.
All
So
right.
you'd have 2 summer hats for gentlemen back in that day. One would be a Panama hat for the summer, and the other one would be a Milan straw. Panamas are still made in Ecuador. They're hand woven by master people who do that their whole life. And this is a different process where people will braid this by hand into a long strip. This is about 60 yards of straw. And you soak it in water and then you run it through the machine. The point is, most straw hats today are, first of all, aren't made out of real straw. They're made out of a toa paper or maybe hemp. Hemp is somewhat traditional, or a synthetic straw.
And how does genuine straw change the feel of the hat?
Well, it's hard to explain. You have to touch it. I mean, there's a much different feel to that than a synthetic polyester braid or a paper braid. But the thing is, most those people who do sew straw will typically sew a much wider diameter. So this is a 6mm to 7mm braid.
That's going to be a much coarser.
It's going to be a much coarser hat. It's going to be heavier. It's not going to have that suppleness to it. Great if you're working out in the fields.
Yeah, I got to say this is a lot softer than like the typical straw, like John Deere hat you might find at the practice.
And like I said, if you're working out on the fields all day, if you think about Amish, right, they'll have nice big straw hats that are heavier and coarser, but it's a work hat. A Milan straw would be much more of a gentleman's hat to wear while going to work or in the city. Or
Now, function-wise, how does like the 8-panel and the cap differ from the straw? Is it just the season that makes it different, or is it actually different time periods involved here?
they're going to cross over. So I think the way I look at it, someone who's wearing a cap most likely would be a younger person, and it's really coincidentally I happened to go to one of my friends is on a vintage baseball team that plays in 1896 rules, and so I went there and looked at the equipment and the balls they were using and the hats, and I started doing research on a lot of hats, and some of the earliest baseball caps were actually 8-panel caps with a button and with the blouse and the drape that you're wearing right there.
So the modern baseball cap is
very
out
similar
of
to
something
that.
like this.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I'm looking at where most younger men would be wearing a cap, or you're going to have gentlemen who are going to go out for a day riding horses or hunting or something like that are going to wear a cap.
So more of a sport
Something
hat
for
than a work hat.
probably a 3-season, fall, winter, spring. They're going to wear the fedoras primarily for town, unless it's a cowboy or a frontier hat. But, yeah, that's how. And the early caps, workmen would be wearing much more of an apron or a flat cap to work. If you're a machinist or a mechanic or that type of thing.
So, your patterns. Are you using vintage patterns, or are these your own creations?
These are my interpretations. Just by looking and drawing up pattern after pattern. We were talking earlier before the interview on the hat that you're wearing.
This is a Daryl Began original.
Yeah. year 2 or something like that. But depending on the era you're going to have in the style and the purpose, they're going to put a lot more tailoring to some caps than other caps. Where I was talking to you how I tapered in for a second, where there's much more of a taper back through where the sweatband is. Sometimes they might put a little outside band in it. So that's a much more tailored look. It'll give it a higher rise. Lately I've been geeking out on much more of a workman's hat. Where it's much more of a draping kind of drop in it. And I tend to, back in the day, the drape was going to be a lot bigger than what I have. For the most part, you'll find other caps that are tighter to the head, more applejack.
Is there a specific etiquette about which hats to wear when, or was it just,
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure what that etiquette was. So I don't know if I could really speak to that.
Fair enough. Well, Daryl, I think we've taken up just about as much of your time as we should.
Boy,
thank you very much for talking with us here at the Roaring Tony's Lawn Party.
Thank you. All right. Dude.